the Remarkable Retail Podcast, the first retail industry podcast set to declare itself an AI platform with an 8-figure market value. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm Steve Dennis.
On this episode, part 2 of our Retail Rumble, recorded live on the stage at ShopTalk Las Vegas. Our topics for this session are, can department stores be resurrected, with you, Steve, taking on the always dynamic Ken Pilot? And is AI a threat or opportunity for your job? Featuring Lauren Livak Gilbert taking on Sarah Engel. Now, before we get to our Retail Rumbles, our Retail Rumblers will be covering the top retail news stories of the week, including the first results from the commencement of earnings season, some March retail results on the toppy side, as our friend Neil Saunders might say, tariffs, remember those. And after the Retail Rumble, we'll be talking about an interesting AI pivot by our friends at Allbirds, Starbucks News, and what is on our radar screens. Now, we got some exciting, encouraging news about de-escalation in the Iran war, which sent the stock market soaring and oil prices plummeting on Friday last week. Obviously, very dynamic, volatile situation. And, you know, we could, whatever we say today probably will be either wrong or somewhere off base by the time you're listening to this. So we're just going to let that settle. And we're going to come back next week with more fulsome commentary of its impact on the retail industry. All right. Let's get into earnings seasons. Starting en masse, we are hot in the middle of the beginning of the phase of earnings season. Let's start with the big luxury guys.
Yeah, well, I will do a little bit of a caveat on this. I'm sure most people know this, but typically when we talk about retail earnings, we've got to be mindful of kind of two periods. There are those retailers that are reporting their results through the end of March, so more the calendar sequence for quarters, and then we'll get really more retailers that will be the end of April. So right now, next few weeks, we'll be getting the March ending, and then maybe a little bit of a pause, though. It seems like earnings season just kind of stretches out. So anyway, yeah, so we got the big luxury players this week. Because it's March ending, any earnings impact from the war would be presumably fairly modest. Now, just for context, many observers, analysts were expecting a robust luxury bounce back or rebound this year. I actually talked about this in my predictions, saying I was a bit skeptical about that, but of course that was before the war broke out. So the issues are fairly broad. One little statistic I saw before I talk about the particular news we got was that luxury brands are seeing, as we might expect, very large sales declines in the Gulf region. In particular, in the UAE, reports, for example, that the Mall of Emirates has seen their sales down 30 to 50% in March. Wow. So to the extent that is seen throughout the region, and that's a part of the world where luxury is quite important. Let's just talk about the three big players here, or three of the really big players. LVMH, which has seen their sales decline or soften quite a bit. They were up on an organic basis about 1%. What do I mean by organic? That is adjusting for currency fluctuations, which there have been quite a lot. So that's getting a little bit in the weeds. But if you look at it by division, their watches, jewelry, wine and spirits, and Sephora, one of their key brands, did quite well. It was really the fashion and leather brands, so Louis Vuitton itself, but some of the other brands that remain fairly weak. Geographically, Asia has been pretty strong, but Europe, the US, and of course the Middle East were relatively weak and presumably will be weaker in this next quarter, and their profitability is getting squeezed. This is an issue I keep coming back to, is it's pretty hard to drive your profits if your sales are flat-ish, because for the most part, you've got input costs going up. Kering, the other big conglomerate, continued weakness. I saw somebody refer to this as a turnaround with more promise than proof so far under their new CEO, Luca De Meo. Flattish sales overall. Gucci, which is their big brand, still continues to be down just about everywhere except the US for reasons I don't quite understand. So that is a turnaround in progress, but again, presumably get some headwinds from the Middle East in the next quarter. Now, Hermes, who we always talk about as the shining star, they still were the relative star, but their growth slowed down quite a bit, again, particularly in the Middle East. And their stock, which has been doing really well, they're an incredibly highly valued company. In fact, at one point, I'm not sure, I hadn't checked recently, they were more valuable than LVMH. despite from a sales perspective, their sales being considerably larger, their stock really got hammered.
Now, beyond the luxury players, let's talk about Albertsons. Let's talk about the grocery. We've talked about them actually a couple episodes ago about thinking more about our friends in the grocery sector and the broader forces on them. What did you hear from Albertsons?
Yeah, I didn't want to focus in a super detailed fashion on Albertsons in particular, but it gets back to, as you alluded to, what we talked about a couple weeks ago when we talked about Kroger, one of the other big U.S. retailers, which is it's really in the context of the struggles in the unremarkable middle, as I like to talk about it. So Albertsons reported 0.7% comp increase, and they guided that they expected the balance of the year to be essentially flat. Now, this comes against the backdrop of Walmart and Costco continuing to do well. Now, that's not all grocery, but Walmart is the biggest grocer in the country. Costco is huge. So I think we'll end up seeing that Walmart and Costco will have comp store sales in the 5, 6, 7% range, which will speak to good strength in their grocery business, presumably. But I also have something interesting, I think, that maybe slipped under the radar. So this will seem like a little bit of diversion, but I'll bring it back. But as many listeners would know, Andy Jassy, Amazon's CEO, does an annual shareholders letter. It is always packed with interesting information, though it does go into probably more detail than most people care about. But there was something that we in the writing business say is burying the lead. By the way, lead is spelled L-E-D-E. People get that wrong. Anyway, what he revealed pretty far into the letter was that Amazon was now the number 2 grocer in the United States. They had grown their grocery business so much that by their estimates anyway, they are now slightly bigger than Kroger. So I think that's a pretty big deal. And we've talked about their growth in grocery quite a bit, particularly as they've really upped their convenience game and now are really rolling out more fresh product, because that was the thing that really held them back. So despite their physical retail strategy not going anywhere, they seem to be doing quite well. So I think this is something to watch, because I don't expect we'll see any real slowing down in Amazon's momentum there. And that'll be something that it will be quite challenging for the more mid-tier traditional grocers.
Well, speaking of sales and speaking of being toppy, if you recall, listeners might recall a couple of episodes ago, we were talking about the NRF forecast for 26, and Neil described it as toppy. In other words, it seemed quite optimistic. We're starting to see some numbers come out from March that seem to validate, at least so far, the predictions.
Yeah, I was really surprised by this, and I guess this is at least a down payment on the overall forecast. So the specific thing was that core retail, so this excludes auto purchases, gas, which of course seeing quite a bit of inflation, and restaurants. Sure. The year-over-year sales were up 7.05%. That is well above the average for retail. And it is an improvement in trend from the last 2 months. Now, there's some speculation that this has been driven by the larger than typical tax refunds. Maybe. Yeah. And again, because of the war impact, perhaps not seeing that as much in March. And that's something we'll see this month. But it is a little bit hard to understand. I'll just point out a few things that I thought were interesting. Personal care, health and beauty aids, apparel, and sporting goods were all up in the low teens percentage, which I don't really recall seeing numbers like that not in recent past. I didn't go back to check, but that really stood out to me. And again, it's pretty hard to understand exactly what's driving that. General merchandise stores, so this would include department stores, but also Walmart, Target, et cetera, up over 9%. And that is the highest number that I can recall. So, there's some uptick in inflation in these numbers, I would say. But, we talked last week about how we have the lowest consumer sentiment in the history, 70 years of tracking these numbers. So it's pretty hard to square this. So I don't have an explanation, but it really caught my attention.
We've been talking over the years now about the impacts of the GLP-1 drugs on the fashion business.
Yeah.
And Circana had this fun, interesting factoid that the average bra size sales in America is going down.
Yeah.
And they see that as a leading indicator for fashion sizes. Yeah. And I wonder if what's driving some of this fashion is the many, many Americans who are redoing their wardrobes. And we've been talking about this. Are we starting to like double-digit growth in that category? Well, they're certainly not spending it on home improvement, so maybe that's where we're seeing the money.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that's got to be a big driver. But yeah, I think we need a little more granularity on it because apparel has been up higher than average growth rates for quite some time, and I do think GLP-1's got to be part of that. But yeah, it's really interesting. But yeah, against the broader backdrop of consumer sentiment, it's hard to understand. So hopefully we'll get a little bit more clarity on what's going on. And then of course we'll see, sometimes weather, there's other things that go into 1 month being maybe a bit of an outlier.
Speaking of last March, let's talk about tariffs. And we haven't talked about tariffs in a while. Nobody's talking about tariffs in a while. There seems to be some other distractions happening. And let's spend a bit of time on it because I've lost track. It's funny. I was reading your notes and whatever happened to all those refunds? What's going on with that? And talk about what you're hearing and seeing in the world of tariffs.
Well, I think fairly quickly on this, but I remember thinking last week, tariffs were so much of the story, and maybe we talked about them even too much, but that was just a huge narrative within retail for the better part of a year, right? And then haven't heard too much about it. Now, for sure, the war has kind of sucked the oxygen out of the story. Last week, we did see, though, that apparently, though this is subject to change like just about everything in the world seems to be these days, refunds are about to get paid. That will be a nice addition to many retailers' bottom line. But of course, tariffs are still being collected. There have been lots of waivers and things kicked down the road. Last week, the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, said that they're thinking about imposing new tariffs to make up for the tariffs that have been declared illegal. So it's a very unclear picture and it's not getting, for sure, as much attention as it was previously getting. The only thing we have really heard, and presumably we will hear as retailers reveal their earnings, is they will call out in many cases, as we've heard some folks talk about, what's the impact been and how does that impact their forecast. So yeah, I think it's maybe this is on the radar screen kind of thing for us. But yeah, it just kind of struck me like, somehow I haven't heard much about that.
Well, you're the one that makes predictions, but I have made the prediction and I stick to it that we will be seeing the tariff refund sales promotions come from the retailers starting pretty soon. We got the money back, we're giving it back to you kind of promotion. So we can count on our retail colleagues to turn a frown upside down for the rest of the year in terms of tariffs. All right. Well, that's a wrap on this part of the news. We'll be back with more news and what's on our radar screen after our Rumbles and the retail Rumbles. We're going to be talking about, can department stores be resurrected? And then, is AI a threat or opportunity for your job? So a reminder to everyone that for the retail Rumbles, the audience voted. It was an audience would vote on who was the most popular by applause. And so we'll be declaring winners on both sides of the debates.
Now, our next contestants will be coming on stage to debate. Can the department store be resurrected? If you know these two, you know that this is not the first time that they've had this debate, but we're going to bring it to you live on the Shop Talk Retail Rumble stage. Let's bring out our first contestant arguing for the department stores being resurrected in the blue corner, hailing from New York, it's Ken Pontius Pilot, founder and CEO of Ken Pilot Ventures. Arguing against department stores being resurrected in the red corner, by way of Dallas, Texas, it's Steve Snarknado Dennis, president and founder of Sageberry Consulting. Ken is a world-class padel player with 2 hip and 2 knee replacements. Let's see if he can survive the Retail Rumble stage. And Steve holds the Guinness World Record for the most uses of bifurcation among living writers.
For more than a century, which is slightly older than my partner over here, department stores have proven their resilience. They've survived economic downturns, the Amazon era, and they've also survived some podcasts that I will not go mention. They've survived direct-to-consumer brands, forcing reinvention, closing underperforming concepts, reforming stores, refining assortments, and investing in what truly differentiates them: customer service, curation, and experience. Unlike mass retailers, department stores are around discovery, not volume, helping customers find new and existing brands. Department stores prove to be the most cost-effective way for brands to scale and new brands to survive. They present their product in a way that allows wholesale to thrive. Think global, not local. The best department stores embrace physical and digital shopping, enhance hospitality and amenities, transforming shopping into meaningful experiences. Selfridges, Bon Marché, Hierro de Palacio. Am I done?
You're done.
Oh, no shit.
The squeaking Elvis is what tells you you're done.
That's remarkable.
I'm
sorry, Steve.
It up.
Sorry.
You owe me 10 cents.
Okay.
Cool story, bro. Alas, facts are stubborn things, and the facts are pretty brutal. Over the past 2 decades, department stores' share of total retail has plummeted from 10% to 1.8%. More than 50% of all mall-based department stores have closed in the last 10 years. Since 2019, overall retail has grown 40%. JCPenney, down 40%. Kohl's, down 26%. Macy's, down 12%. Now, Bloomingdale's, Nordstrom's, and Dillard's have done a little bit better, but their growth hasn't even kept pace with inflation. And in just the last several weeks, Neiman Marcus and Saks have announced they're closing 50% of their stores. These problems aren't a matter of execution. They are strategic and they are fundamental. And addressing execution issues doesn't solve the problem, doesn't rise, which is what resurrection is really about. Department stores, to put it plainly, are built for an era that no longer exists. I yield my time.
Pontius Pilate, he's calling your argument mid, bro. What do you have to say?
Well, Steve doesn't get out of the country much, but if you take a look at the Middle East, you take a look at the Far East, actually department stores have grown. It's in the U.S. where we have actually 24 square feet of space per consumer, per capita, versus China and Asia, where it's less than 2 feet per capita, or Europe, which is 5 feet per capita. Good concepts are still thriving. It's the format, Steve, that needs to be addressed. And there have been many failed specialty store retailers in the U.S. as well. And I think one of the challenges most faced by department stores is those who've worked for them in the past, such as you, Steve. You have worked for Sears. Where are they? Gone. You, Steve, were at Neiman Marcus. Where are they? Chapter 11. I was at Macy's. They are still around. So bring it, brother.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, my gosh. Keep it above the belt. Hey, get back in your corner.
I will point out, I left Neiman Marcus in 2008, which is the all-time EBITDA, but you can take the last helicopter out of Saigon, my friend, if you like. I don't know if you've heard of a little country called Canada. I think we might have a Canadian on stage. And their department stores have gone through a few things. But actually, last week, there was a study that showed overall department stores worldwide only grew by 0.83%, which points to a problem. When inflation is 3% and your sales are going nowhere, what is going to happen to your profit? What are you left doing? Cutting costs, cutting service, closing stores. That is the cycle we have been in for 20 years.
Steve, only good department stores can create a great assortment. Department stores carry 2x the number of brands that any mall can display at a given point in time. It's about curation. It's the buyer's eye. It's about combining the digital with the physical. It's creating a concept that's memorable. Take a look at stores in Dubai where you can go skiing, where you used to be able to before we started to bomb. It's bad over there, really bad. But now when shoppers go back, they'll be on the slopes, they'll be in the aquarium, or they'll be at Harrods at the tea shop. There are so many experiences that you can have in great department stores. Bad ones will fail, Bad ones are boring. Aren't you about boring retail, Steve? Don't you talk about that in your books, your volumes? Yeah. Get out there and experience the world, Steve. You've got to get away from the mic. And I can't believe you could do this on your own without the help of him.
Oh.
I'm not saying all department stores are going to go away, but you can only point to maybe 1% of all the locations in the world that are actually interesting. I challenge you to go into just about any department store, certainly in North America, and not feel like they are over-assorted, over-spaced, carrying a ton of merchandise, which is undifferentiated. And by the way, their wholesale partners, what have they been doing? They've been opening stores down the mall. You can go around every mall, and what you see is dozens, most of the good malls, dozens of the vendors that are being sold right inside the same department store. So the only way you're going to reinvent yourself is to downsize, is to invest. And what are these department stores doing with their money? Dividends, share buybacks. They are not spending any real money on their stores. Thank you for your attention to this matter, by the way.
Steve, if you look at the department stores, and I hear you, and you're right, the bad ones go away.
What was that? Was that the last thing you said? You're right?
You cannot say that on the stage, Ken.
Steve, your instincts are correct. He's right. There are good concepts out there. There are good concepts out there, and the good concepts are what will survive. It's about the format, not about the concept. And the format of department stores, smaller, not bigger. Not like, you're shopping in America. It's all you talk is about North America, where you have 200,000 square foot department stores. But when you get down to 30 or 50,000 square feet, or even the positive reviews you managed to give Printemps in New York City, and they were positive. I went back and I listened and I watched, and they were positive, Steve. You liked it. It killed you, but you liked it. They present a compelling assortment of product, and they do it well for the customer when they can do it well on their own.
I think it's arguable whether a real resurrection is finding one store somewhere that happens to do well. Is Printemps going to be... well, first of all, I'm not even sure Printemps is a department store. Different topic, perhaps.
Boutique, maybe?
But
Boutique.
They're not going to be expanding that format. So where is the resurrection? It's a one-off, and there are a few of them, but the overall industry continues to contract, and there are very few positive signs of any major chains making any real performance improvement.
Once again, you're talking about the United States. El Corte Inglés, Horacio de Guerrero, SKP in Beijing. Mm-hmm. These are all powerful department stores and experiences, and they're doing well.
That's a wrap on that argument. 30 seconds for each of you to conclude.
Age before beauty.
Thank you. Well, Pontius Pilate was an interesting choice for your fighter name, given his, shall we say, complicated relationship to resurrections. It's bold to name yourself after somebody who made the wrong call and knew it. But department stores en masse won't and can't be resurrected. I wish it was different, but the evidence, as I shared at the top, is overwhelming, and the verdict is in. You can point to a few rare examples, but by and large, most department stores are falling further and further behind, even with a little bit of better execution. So it's merely a managed decline, not a resurrection.
The best shopping experiences today, I can test, are in a department store, and they are global. You just have to get out of your own backyard to see and experience them. Steve, you continue to present a myopic view, typical American, grounded in what he knows and afraid to travel. Well, my friend, when you get out into the world and you go to some of the stores I mentioned, which you probably hadn't heard of before, you would find that the assortment, the product, the experience, the memories is more than compelling. Doesn't mean they'll all be winners, but they will survive. And that's what this has been about, the survival of department stores.
All right, everybody, let's have a hand for our rumblers. Head to the center of the stage.
All right.
Time to vote.
Oh, yeah, shake hands.
So,
good.
who's voting for Steve Snarknado Dennis? And now who's voting for Ken Pontius Pilate? And who's the winner?
I gotta go for Ken Pontius Pilate. Pilate, I'm
wow.
sorry, Steve, but I was close. It was a close match.
Here. Let's have a hand
guys.
for our two rumblers. We'll be right back with our final rumble. Is AI a threat or opportunity for your job? Right after these messages. The biggest names in retail don't guess. They use Placer AI. Placer's location intelligence platform turns foot traffic into real strategy, giving you near real-time insights into market share, cross-shopping trends, and trade areas for any location in America. Whether you're entering a new market, tracking a competitor, or optimizing your existing footprint, Placer gives you the data to decide with confidence. Visit placer.ai to see it in action. Promotional support for the Remarkable Retail podcast is provided by Crave Retail. What's retail's biggest blind spot? The fitting room. A shopper wants to buy, but can't get the help they need. That's why global brands partner with Crave Retail, the market leader in smart fitting rooms. Crave connects that moment to your business, giving shoppers a voice, associates real-time alerts, and teams the data to buy smarter. The result? Higher conversion, better decisions, a seamless experience. Learn how fast you can elevate your fitting rooms at craveretail.com.
All right, there we go. We're calling for our last and final. This is all about AI. Can't spell retail without AI. Can't spell failure either, so we'll figure out which way this is going to go. Is AI a threat or opportunity for your job? Lauren Livak Gilbert, in arguing for, she was a ballerina. Let's hear it for her. The context queen. Welcome. And arguing no, it's an opportunity. Sarah, belle of the brawl, Engel. Let's hear it for her. Woo! President January Digital. Excellent. Welcome to both of you. All right, we're going to bring it home with a real rumble. Let's get started. Lauren.
Every meaningful transformation started as a threat. The automobile, the internet, e-commerce, but the people who embrace those threats are the ones that are leading the industry today. So is AI a threat to your job? Yes. Are robots coming into your office tomorrow to steal your laptop and do your work? No. But the job you have today is not the job you are going to have tomorrow. AI can already do many of the things in your job better, faster, and smarter. McKinsey found that 50% of the work that gets done today can already be automated with technology. That doesn't mean 50% of your job goes away tomorrow, but the job inside of it changes. What if your entire retail media campaign can be automated? What if your content development, your testing, and your syndication can be automated? Or all of the work gets taken away that your analysts are doing? It redefines that 50%, and it becomes a choice. Will you adapt, or will you fall behind? The future is about creating value, orchestrating change, figuring out where the heck the growth is going to come from in 2026 and 2027, and learning how to be an AI-enabled organization. We are at a career-defining moment. Embrace the threat.
Time is done. Sarah, 1 minute opening statement or 1 minute and change?
So Lauren and I decided we were bringing civility back to the stage, first of all. I'd like every person in this room to think about why you said yes to this industry. You said yes, not because you wanted to do spreadsheets and PowerPoint decks. You said yes because you wanted to create something. Like, you wanted it to be meaningful. You wanted customer connections. And we've gotten so busy in the business of being busy that we lost all of that. And AI gives us this opportunity to get that back. So there's 3 ways in which we're going to be able to do this. First of all, we're going to get time back. 88% of marketers say that they spend more time reporting than creating. And the London School of Economics says that if people are using AI, they will save a full workday to reinvest in other work. Capability, it doesn't just save time, right? It changes what's possible, and I think we actually agree on that. Small brands can go up against the giants, right? And it gives you this new opportunity. And uniquely human value, the things that we are great at, storytelling, connections, relationships, that's what we're going to be able to invest our time in. That's the opportunity. So it's not a threat to your career if you embrace it. You have to embrace it. It is an opportunity to get back to doing what you love to begin with.
Lauren, do you want another day of your week that just suddenly appears? What's wrong with that?
Well, here's the thing. You might get a day back, but all of the work that's getting done, you don't need 100 strategists, right? You might free up time to think more and do other work, but not everybody's ready for that. They don't know how to be trained on being AI-enabled, working with agents, and orchestrating. So that means that you need to upskill, you need to reskill, you need to change how you think, and if you don't do that, you can't unlock that time.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you. However, I think that is a leadership problem. That is not an AI challenge. That's a leadership problem. If you cannot upskill, reskill your teams, if you can't think 9 months, 2 years ahead of what your people are going to need to do, that's on you. That's a leadership issue. That's not, they have to be able to evolve and be able to bring people up to speed and determine what roles are even necessary going into the future.
But I also think that's why AI is a threat, because we don't know. We don't know what's going to change tomorrow. We don't know what's going to change in 3 weeks, in a month, right? Yeah. So we're trying to figure out what are these new jobs that are appearing, what skills matter, how are you figuring that out? We're all kind of guessing.
Right, and that's why we put our youngest people to work. Like, otherwise, my kids who are in high school are not going to have a job, right? It's like, put them to work. They are the ones who are figuring it out. They're innovating. Your best employees, like, it creates a new floor. AI creates a new floor, so it raises the ceiling for everybody. Your highest employees have a higher ceiling, and you're going to have so much more success with them. So I think it is, again, it's the job of leaders, like, reskill, upskill, figure out how to hire, figure out how to train, figure out how to make AI a part of your culture, and that's how you're going to make a more successful organization.
But what happens to all those analyst roles? Like, how many of you have done, like, forecasting and Excel sheets, and you cut your teeth on that? That's how you learned how to be who you are today, how to lead. But, like, if you can't do that work, how are you going to become the future leader of tomorrow? So yes, it's definitely a management problem, but it's also an AI challenge because it's taking away that work and it's not giving the opportunity to these new people coming out of college at the analyst level to lead the companies that we're all in now.
And 86% more impact on women. So, like, it's our responsibility to find this an opportunity. It's our responsibility to go, all right, how are we going to take people with a specific skill set? How are we going to shorten that time to them being AI enabled, to them being able to, again, get back to the things that are so uniquely human? Like, we don't want a bunch of people doing very tactical, very mechanical things. Like, free them up to do real work that they can enjoy. You're going to keep your employees longer. They're going to be more satisfied. And again, we're going to create a moat that allows women to succeed as well.
I mean, I can't argue with that. I genuinely cannot argue with that.
Hey, it's against the rules. It's against the rules. I read that Deloitte said, and we had some numbers coming out of here, that 61% of Gen Zs fear more than enjoy AI. They think it's going to take their job before they have a chance to do the shopping with the bot. Sarah, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, again, I have teens, and they use it in very specific ways, but they're like, I'm going to be an artist, and they're getting back to these very, like, hands-on experiences. So, like, there is some of that exists. Again, hands-on human experiences, that's a win. If they have AI to enable them in the things that are mundane and boring and repetitive and nobody wants to do, it allows them to go out there and do careers that are really, really going to be so enjoyable for them and that are going to give them a higher sense of purpose.
That's a great point, Lauren. The kind of, I'm going to do not just busy work, I'm going to do better work. We've been hearing that since, self-checkout days, when we're going to free up people and they'll do more value-added work. You think that's going to work out?
I mean, has it worked out? That's my question to you. Yeah. I mean, has it worked out?
Let's tell the audience. We're going to know. So. Let's ask the audience.
We're promising all these things, which I think is amazing, and it is great, and there is an opportunity. But all of that work has to go somewhere. All of those people need to go somewhere. They need to be working on something. What does that look like? AI might create new jobs, but we don't know what those are going to be, and it's probably going to displace more jobs first before it creates those jobs and we figure out what they are.
Right. Yeah, but I think that has happened throughout history, right? Like, that's happened in every major, industrial revolution. That's happened in every way. And people who stuck their head in the sands, people who didn't just evolve with the process and stay a step ahead, they were the ones we're not talking about now. So, like, when we're back here in 2030, it's the people who are, like, leaned in, trying to figure this out, trying new things, constantly testing. Like, they're the only ones who are going to succeed. And that's been proven through history as these changes have happened.
Well, I think I was talking to a brand today at this conference, and they came up to me and they said that people were boycotting in their organization, that they refused to use AI because they thought it was going to take their job. That's why AI is a threat. Oh. Most people inside organizations are worried. You've spent, 20, 30 years learning an industry, and then one day someone says, hey, I can do that in 5 minutes. Yeah. That is a huge threat to a lot of organizations and to a lot of jobs, and people are fearful of that. They don't know what's coming next. They don't know what to do with their career.
Yeah, and I mean, fear can hold you back from many things. And I think, again, as a leadership group, it's your responsibility to eliminate fear, create empowerment. I mean, I have talked with a lot of folks who are restricting it in their organizations. Those organizations are not going to survive. Like, hard stop. They're not going to survive.
And if you don't change internally, like that, nobody's talking about that. I haven't seen people talking about what are you doing to upskill, to reskill? Yeah. How do you know how to work with agents? How do you change your organizational structure? Those are the questions. Yeah. That's why it's a threat.
How do you fire? How do you hire?
All right. Last 30 seconds. Last 30 seconds for your best argument. Lauren, let's start with you.
We've seen this story play out in commerce. I mean, e-commerce changed everything for retail. It changed the way consumers shop. It changed the way you work with your teams. AI is doing the same thing, just 10 times faster. Goldman Sachs estimates that 300 million jobs will be affected globally. If you do not rewire and redesign your organization, AI is a threat.
Last words.
The last final words. We talked about the fear factor, right? Like, yes, change is scary. And also, after 20 years in this industry, it's constantly changing. Like, if you don't love that, it might not be the industry for you. Like, this is a tough industry. And Rachel said it earlier, right? The brands that win are the ones who lean in, out-innovate, continue to train. It's our responsibility to hire and train in these right ways. The solution's not to slow down technology. The solution is to evolve with it. So take those mundane, those repetitive tasks off the plate. Use it as an opportunity to do the things that you love to begin with. Like, get out there, talk to customers, like, enjoy retail again.
All right, so let's give a round of applause to our last two contestants for the Retail Rumble. Join Michael on stage here.
Fighters.
Okay.
All right, let's hear a round of applause for Lauren, the context queen, Livak. All right, and if you are in Sarah, the Belle of the Brawl Angles category, let's hear a round of applause. Oh, we have two standing ovations back there, Michael. This is a tough one. I'm glad I'm not making this call.
I am declaring a tie. Yes is the answer.
We want to give a big thank you to all of you for joining us at ShopTalk Retail's very first Retail Rumble. Give yourselves a round of applause.
Let's hear it, everybody. Thank you.
All right. Well, Steve, I purposely had Ann Mazinga do the refereeing on the Rumble between you and Ken. I didn't want anyone to think there was any bias baked in. Now, as a debater, what I was
thinking? I could have used it.
Yeah, it turns out, though it probably would have been appealed or whatever to the higher order, whatever that looks like. Now, as I was watching and listening to the two of you, I started to think about the tradecraft of debating a little bit as I listened, and both decisions from both of you on where to engage, where to continue. How did you think about that, and any thoughts after your fun with Ken?
Well, now that I've recovered from my shame, I did have a little chance to reflect on it. Yeah, it's interesting. Of course, this is the first time doing it. I assume all the debaters had their own prep. Obviously, we had the structure of the opening and the close, but then everything in between, you have to think about what points you want to make and then anticipate what you might get. And I have to say, I did not anticipate Ken going after my international bona fides. Mm-hmm. And in the moment, I don't know if it would have made any difference. Of course, I've been to all those retailers. I know them very well. And none of them are really performing any better than the U.S. department stores. So I don't think it was the most cogent argument, but I didn't anticipate it. And I do remember kind of in the moment, do I respond to that or do I get back to the points that I really wanted to make? It's also just kind of ironic that literally the day that we did this debate, our guest was the CEO of a Hong Kong-based retailer. So anyway, but this is all 2020 hindsight. But I think we're as we reflect on the whole thing, part of this was to have fun. Part of this was to have some serious content. So I'll stick by my facts, and let's talk in a few years and see who's right. Spoiler alert: it's me.
And shout out to Ann Mazinga, my fellow judge and fellow MC. Wonderful job, and it was great to have her on the stage. Let's get to a couple of other things in the news. We debated where to put this. This whole Allbirds declaring itself an AI platform. I almost wanted to start with it, but I think it's in the right place. Are we living in some kind of parallel universe kind of evidence kind of news story? So, tell the people who may have not picked up on this what the news was, and I don't know, what do you make of it?
I guess, first of all, I'll say when I saw this news in my LinkedIn feed, I assumed the algorithm had served me up an April Fool's joke, and I just missed it. I definitely didn't have it on my bingo card. And then I felt compelled to write about it in my Substack. And going back to one of my favorite Hemingway quotes, it was titled Gradually, Then Suddenly, Then GPU. But yeah, the news is Allbirds spread its wings straight into a server farm. As we have talked about, Allbirds is this high-flying bird that crashed back down to Earth. So the valuation went from $4 billion to $35 million to even lower. They sold their IP, basically. I mean, it's a little complicated, and it's still unclear how this is going to sort out. They sold their IP for their footwear business, but they're keeping their NASDAQ shell, I guess, and raising money to pivot to be a GPU as a service AI compute platform or something, and they will be called Newbird AI. Come on. The craziest thing about this was, I'm sure plenty of people saw, and it got a lot of coverage on like Bloomberg and CNBC, was the day they announced this, the stock shot up like 700%. I spent the better part of the afternoon trying to figure out how to short the stock. Unfortunately, I could not figure that out because I would have made some money because the stock then went down by 500%. So I don't know where. I haven't checked the ticker this morning. But this I think is the early contender for either the dumbest or weirdest retail-related story of the year.
Well, let's wrap up on the news with Starbucks. So they've been in a years-long now turnaround plan with its own ups and downs. But now they've got a reimagining plan, and that's getting some publicity. So what did you read of it?
Yeah, a couple of things. Kind of a high-level point is they have this back to Starbucks strategy, reimagination plan, whatever you want to call it. And I guess the best way to kind of think of it is a little bit back to the future, because it's this idea of going back or getting closer to the third place concept that was really at the origin of Starbucks, a place you could hang out, more community, more interaction, more experiential, to use the cliche, than experience, or more joys over jobs, as I sometimes talk about it in this dichotomy. And so they have been doing a number of things to try to get back to that. Some of them are more or less chain wide. But the particular thing in the news last week was they're reimagining some of their particular stores. Chicago is one of the test beds, so they made a big deal about adding the couches. It's kind of the couchification of Starbucks, and I'm going to resist making a J.D. Vance joke because it's very tasteless. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how well this works. We talked about in my predictions that I think one of the things that's a real challenge for Starbucks is just this realization that part of the world, has moved to hyper convenience. At the same time, part of the way you differentiate yourself in a technology-driven world is to be a place that leans into the human experience and being social, and we're wired for connection. And can Starbucks do a little bit of both? Are they finding a place where they can be truly remarkable and own that position against a sea of competitors that are more about speed and convenience? We'll see. But that seems to be the essence of Brian Nichols. They're not so new, I guess, anymore, CEO, and we're starting to see it come to life. So I think it's definitely something to keep our eye on.
Let's get into what's on the radar screen. What are you thinking about?
Well, so I've got a trip planned at the end of May, early June, to Portugal and Spain. And one of the things I saw in the news last week was an industry group saying that Europe will be out of jet fuel in 6 weeks' time, given that that's about the time I will be there. That got my attention. But of course, it's really in the broader context that we've talked about. Yeah. Of the ripple effects, the downstream effects, the order, second order and third order effects of the war. Now, maybe the news that has been breaking will shift the narrative a little bit, but I do think it takes a long time, even under the best case scenario, for things to get back on track. So what's on my radar screen is travel, at least global travel, about to come off the rails. Airfares are up sharply. We have seen many airlines paring back their schedules, not only, most obviously, of course, in the Middle East. I think 14% of all air travel goes through the Gulf region, and that obviously has been severely affected. But KLM, British Airways, United, many of the Asian carriers have started to cancel their flights. I think clearly the Gulf is almost certainly a bit of a write-off this year in terms of it being a major vacation destination. But, I guess in the retail context, really two things. One is, to the extent we see more of this kind of spooling out, what does that do for the general uncertainty backdrop to how we make decisions? Like, if people can't even fly, go on vacation, or go on business trips, what does that really mean for just the way we think about leaning into our strategies? Does that force more conservatism, maybe more layoffs, more capital cutbacks, broadly? But the other thing, of course, is travel is important to retail in many cities. People tend to do quite a bit of shopping when they go on vacation. Certain cities, very reliant. I think I've said this on the podcast before, I don't think I can quote the real numbers, but when I was at Neiman Marcus, Bergdorf Goodman, which is part of the group, had a pretty significant % of their sales come from tourists to New York City. So, we've already seen a cutback on international tourism because of just, in general, the dynamics. It's not specific to the war. It's really people that just don't like the U.S. very much anymore, which I have to say, I feel your pain. But, we see this in London. We see this in Paris. I know you were just in Vancouver. Vancouver, obviously a big gateway city.
A couple of quick thoughts on that. Back to the COVID era with staycations, right? With a lot of people staying, deciding they were going to stay in America, not travel. That actually helped domestic retail. So maybe that's going to contribute to some stronger domestic numbers. And what I'm looking at as an early indicator of the tourist season, so to speak, in America, is ticket sales for the World Cup, which I just heard this week are not quite meeting expectations. Now it's early days. It's not that early days. So those two kind of things will be interesting to watch, balance other out. On my side, this escaped my attention until this week, and I don't know how many people have tracked this, but New York State has now passed legislation, not the city, but the statewide, that retailers must accept cash. Now, this has been talked about for many years. I think even Amazon kind of spurred it with their Go stores. And is this fair? Because there's millions and millions of unbanked Americans, right? Senior citizens. And so, it's not unusual for you or I to walk in a New York City cafe and they say, we don't take cash, we only take digital. Yep. Well, apparently that's now against the law. Now it's going to be probably, kind of on a complaint basis, but it does start to turn your head. Penalties or violations, fines up to $1,000, $1,500 for subsequent violations. It's not going to end the business if you're at the Gap. But at the same time, it does turn the tide a little bit I remember having discussions many years ago when I was back on the advocacy side. I was saying, listen, cash isn't going anywhere. And I got a lot of pushback, actually, from retailers who said, eventually cash is going to be gone. I'm like, yeah, I don't think you're being very customer focused, because there's a lot of people who don't like to pay for a variety of reasons with credit or other properties. So anyway, I'm watching this. Will this happen in other states? Will this now happen in California, big state in California? Right. Yeah. It might not happen in Texas, but it might happen in some other states. So anyway, that's what's on my radar screen for retailers this week.
Thanks for tuning in. To help more retail leaders discover the industry's leading podcast, please drop us that 5-star rating and review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you enjoy your pods. And for more on my strategic advisory services, keynote speaking, best-selling books, and even more retail industry insights, go to StephenPDennis.com.
If you are a brand or service provider looking to take your influence to the next level, reach out to us for sponsorship, advertising, or event partnerships. And if you want to learn more about my own keynote speaking and advisory practice, reach out to me via LinkedIn.